Welcome back to my humble abode. Today we're going to talk about chapter 6 and nonverbal and verbal communication. We communicate multiple ways every day. We communicate by what we wear. It's been said that you cannot not communicate. Had I showed up today in this video with a uh, tank top on or old holy t-shirt on and my hair all afray, um, it would not have presented a good appearance, and y'all would have probably thought, "What's wrong with this old guy?" Or maybe a baseball cap. So I'm non-verbally communicating just by what I wear. If I wear a cross, it would non-verbally communicate that I was probably a Christian. If I wore a Star of David, it would probably non-verbally communicate that I was a Jewish person. So we communicate all the time. Many times we send a message we don't want somebody else to get, or the message we're sending gets obscured somehow. you know, uh, some people don't like tattoos. So if you have a tattoo on your arm, they might think, well, but if you have a tattoo on your face, they might think, what's wrong with this person? And I don't really care where you have tattoos. I don't have any, but my kids all have them. So the thing is in communication, we're going to communicate all kinds of different ways. So let's talk about verbal communication first. Verbal communication has a few functions. One of them is task. What are we expected to do? How should we get there? How much time do we have? What resources do we have? When you're talking to somebody, you express all those things when you're talking about the task to get something done. It really wouldn't function in nonverbal for, what are we expected to do? Or how do we get there? So it's a verbal function. It's a process. And it's a process based on how we say something. It's based on culture. And positive reinforcing comments are usually best. When I was in the military, I had a rule that I would praise in public and admonish in private. It to me it didn't sit well. I don't think it was good leadership to chastise somebody in public. Now I quite a few that I've known don't feel anything wrong with that, and they will do it. But I always felt that when I praised in public and admonished in private, I got a better result from my soldier that I was talking to. We use narratives and fantasies all the time. We're storytellers. Before there was written language, history was passed down through stories. And and we use stories to convey a meaning. It's easier to understand if you can and put it in that frame. And fantasies, for lack of a better word. When the fairy tales were first written, Hansel and Gretel and Sleeping Beauty and all that other stuff, they were stories that were told by the parents to keep the children close to home, keep them safe, don't go out in the dangerous forest. They were very dark. The one that about Sleeping Beauty wasn't that bad, but in the original one, she was raped multiple times and gave birth while she was asleep. So it was grim, and the families created this vision in their children's head that you don't go out there in the forest because it's dangerous, to keep them close to home. And over time, we've lightened them up, and they don't have the same dark um, tempo that they had, but they still have the same meaning, the same fable is to make children understand, hopefully, that it's dangerous out there. Now, we have a couple of different things. We have denotative and connotative meanings. And I probably said this before, and I will probably say it again. When you're talking to somebody, a lot of times what you say is not what they hear. If you say the word dog, they might think of something vicious, or they may think of something that's loving and caring. You don't know. So you have to be careful when you structure your words. Most of you probably know by now that Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed away this last week. She was always extremely careful when she crafted her words because she wanted to get a point across. And you have to be careful when you craft your words. If you leave it up to somebody else's imagination, they may not get the meaning that you wanted them to have. On page 96 in the book, it's got some interesting things in there. They talk about headlines and signs observed around the world, and and it's interesting to see how well some of the headlines that caught my eye was Iowa man's soon to be amputated hand could hold key to murder. How does a hand hold a key if it's amputated? Man minus ear waives hearing. And bar trying to help alcoholic lawyers. Okay, what kind of bar? You know, most of us think of a bar as a place where you go get alcohol, but lawyers have to pass what they call a bar to become a lawyer. So, which bar is helping the alcoholic lawyers? Signs, I've been all over the world, and it's interesting to see how some signs are translated into English, and by doing so, they sound funny to us, but the people that did the translation don't see anything wrong with it. I had an interpreter when I was in Kazakhstan that learned the Queen's English, not American English. And we were doing something, and she asked a question. I said, well, our chief said we can't. She said, chief, and it was a black guy and I working together. And she grabbed her dictionary and looked it up, chief, oh, master. And Charlie and I looked at one another and said, no, we don't use that term. So that's an interpretation, translation thing. But still, people get confused. So how do we deal with this? Well, when we have a group and we group talk, there's a couple of challenging statements that we can use, or we often use. And sometimes they're to our detriment, and other times they're not. We've tried that. You know, okay, we tried it and it didn't work. Or we've always done it this way. Well, what about trying something different? Maybe you tried it, but you didn't try it this way. Well, that cost too much. Well, those of you that have dealt with a budget understand sometimes things are without outside our budget. But if the process or the product is going to be beneficial to us, we need to look at the budget. It's not our problem. That one I have a lot of problem with. You know, I've seen a lot of people, it's not my problem. You know, walking down the street and see a piece of trash. It's not my problem. Would it hurt to bend over and pick it up? Nope, it wouldn't. You can make yourself part of the solution, or you can get in this group talk and say, well, that's not our problem. Nope, we ain't messing with that. And sometimes you have to. Sometimes you have people in the group want to expand it so much you could never get it done. But you need to be careful of words or statements like that. And it's impossible. Nothing's impossible. Now, it might be difficult. It might not be within your budget. It might not be within your skill set. But if you want something, it's possible. If you can find a way to do it. We can also use humor. And humor can relieve tension, but it can be a very slippery slope. Don't know how much y'all have heard about public speaking, but before I got into this field, I used to always hear, "We'll start out with a joke." That's not necessarily a good idea. It depends on the joke. It depends on how you can carry it off, and it depends on your audience. I had a kid that was dual enrolled, high school and college, and his first speech, he walked up to the podium and he stood there and he says, "Well, you know how women are." He just lost his audience because the women were going, "How the heck are we?" And the guys were going, "God, I can't believe he said that." Maybe one or two of the guys went, "Yeah, you might be right," but they weren't going to say anything. So he meant it as a joke. He was trying to break the ice, but he picked the wrong joke and the wrong audience to do it with. Now, I use a lot of humor, but generally it's self deprecating humor. I'm picking on myself, old guy, blind guy, that type of stuff. The audience generally doesn't have a problem with that. But if you're using humor, you need to be careful with it because you can definitely lose a lot of people real quick. You might tell a joke that you think is funny and somebody else thinks is off color. And you've just lost your audience. So you don't want to do that. Or in this particular case, you've lost your group members. You know, if you say something that some meme that you saw on Facebook or Snapchat or whatever, and you think it's funny, but it's prejudiced or it's sexist or something like that, the people in your group might think, I don't trust this person anymore. I'm not going to talk to this person, and it creates walls instead of breaking them down. So, nonverbal communication is about sight, sound, and space. What do you see? What do you hear? And what's around? I mentioned earlier, you know, what you wear is nonverbal communication. When I did my dissertation, I studied what happens with the loss of nonverbal cues between couples. You know, they're both sighted and they got married. Now one of them is blind. Um, and it was interesting because I went through a lot of that myself. But most couples, they have a look, you know, or the spouses have a look. Now, when I could see well, my wife had a couple of looks. One of them was, "Come here, baby, I want you," and the other one was, "If you come near me, I'm going to kill you." I could differentiate those by sight. I can't see that well anymore. So the look, the visual nonverbal is out for me. So I have to go by tone of voice, and I have to go by sound. And a lot of people think that talking is verbal communication. Well, that's true. The words that come out are verbal, but the pitch that you use, the tone that you use, the speed that you use, those are all nonverbal aspects of verbal communication. We use repetition. Repetition reinforces the verbal. You know, like, "I caught a fish this big," or "Okay." It complements verbal. I have a loud, booming voice. So in class, when I think something's important, I talk real soft. And the change in my voice is the key to the students, like, "Oh, something's going on, something's different." Substitution, don't have to say anything, thumbs up. Contradiction, you probably dealt with this one more than once in your life, where your voice says yeah, but your head says no. "Yeah, we'll do that. Uh huh, sure." Regulation, eye contact. In our society, eye contact is an important thing. In many Eastern societies, eye contact is detrimental because it's disrespectful to look at somebody in the eye that's older than you. But we want eye contact. We want head nods. Okay, I hear what you're saying. I agree. Or I hear what you're saying. No, can't do that. And so it regulates. Another thing that regulates, you've ever talked to your boss and notice him looking at him or her looking at their watch? It's kind of like, "My time's important, hurry up, get this over with." If your boss is talking to you and you look at your watch, the boss isn't going to like it well. When you sit at a table, it's a form of nonverbal communication. How do you sit at the table? Are you directly across from one another? That's confrontational. If you sit 90 degrees, it's cooperative. If you sit side by side, it's mixed cooperative. If you sit diagonally, it's active. How are you sitting at the table with your group members or whoever you're talking to? That is something that sends a signal. And something else about nonverbal communication and sitting, I've got to bring this up. It's being all over the world. You know, right now, if well, not right now with the pandemic, but prior to the pandemic, if you went to McDonald's or to the cafeteria or somewhere and you got your food and you walk around and you look for an empty table and you go sit down. If there's no empty tables, you stand there and look around. In Europe, where it's so crowded, if there's 4 seats at a table and you're sitting at one, 3 strangers might walk up and sit down and join you at the table. They'll usually ask if the seat is free, but they don't have a problem with sitting down at the table with you because it's crowded. It's a different culture. So that is nonverbal verbal communication, chapter 6. Once again, y'all got my phone number, you got my email address. If you need me, contact me. I hope you're doing well in your groups, and I'll see you in chapter 7. Have a good day.